Hello all you newsies from the musical. I'm King Link and today I'm taking a last look and review of Headliner. Now I have reached 100 subscribers, so I don't need to beg subscribers as much, but each subscription does help me get newer games from the publishers, and I'd appreciate it if anyone wants to see my content, so please consider subscribing. Alright, so Headliner has a tagline, "What if you control the national news?" It's an interesting idea, and honestly, it sparked a lot of thoughts in my head when I first saw it. So I came into the game with kind of high expectations. I wanted a game that was akin to Orwell. That would have been very welcome to me, especially when Orwell Season 2 tried to go into this area, but it didn't have a deep discussion of news, at least not that one that they hinted at. Headliner tries to reach the same discourse. I'm going to talk more about the gameplay first here, as the story in this game is the more important piece. So, gameplay for Headliner is split into three parts. Part 1 has you choosing which stories to run. Sometimes there's opposing opinions and you have to select one. Sometimes you have a maximum or a minimum number of stories that you can run, but it's always about which stories you select. So then part 2 has you walk home, and this is where you get to hear some feedback from the public, at least what the man and the woman on the street are talking about. Mostly it's walking to the right to get home, as there's no interaction with these discussions, it's at least telling you what's going on. And finally, part 3 has you discuss your day with your family. You have multiple choices and they can affect your family's mood, and you get to hear their personal take on your life, their life, and everything else. Once all three steps are taken, you're finished with the day, and with only 7 days, that's not a lot. I've actually tried to heavily stretch this out here, and it took me a lot to even reach 5 minutes per day. In addition, none of these steps are rather deep. It's a rather shallow experience, giving what actually is a number of binary choices that barely change the game. In reality, this is a bit of a visual novel with a theme thrown on. The real problem here, though, is the game is short. I did do a speedrun that's now available on my channel, linked in the description and hopefully the end credits here, and it took me only 8 minutes and 15 seconds to beat the game, and that's shorter than most of my reviews. Now, that's probably more of a fault for me for the reviews lengths, but it's not a good length on a full run-through of any game. So really, this game's going to have to live and die on that level of story. So let's talk about that. The fact is, with the binary choices here, they're all a bit weak. Some aren't necessary, like a discussion on a new car that's coming out doesn't really affect the game itself, but your choices on the pro or anti-purity movements are critical to the story. The real problem for me, though, is there's really 3 spectrums of the news in this game, and 2 personal spectrums in the entire game, and all are pretty shallow. I've started the video on the second day, so you can see some of the later stories there, and you'll see the discussion of the pro or anti-purity movement. What is interesting with the game here is that the pro-purity movement is treated like the minority. It's an interesting twist, trying to throw a current dynamic on its head in my opinion, but I also have to admit it does sound a bit like making Nazis the victim. I think that's completely unintentional, mind you, but the intended idea is probably more to say that LGBTQ or interracial marriage are the pro-purity groups, at least when talking about the marriage, but it comes off a bit wrong. The big thing, though, is that the mean old anti-purity people who like genetic modifications are persecuting the purists, who don't take genetic mods, but it's mostly done in a very laughable way, as you can see from the story. Honestly, it's a bit silly in my opinion. You can see it, though, in the stories and make up your own decision. The other 2 spectrums, though, is the police state that's currently going on, which only has about 3 stories related to it, and it's mostly how long it takes you to get home. And the war in the neighboring country, which also has a couple stories, and it just affects a little bit on the street. The fact is, the game gives the player too much power. If you choose to side with any of these stories consistently, the entire country will fly into a rage in some way, possibly ending with your death or violence. On the other hand, to get wishy-washy, your ratings goes down and you won't get a promotion. But after playing the game, both of these results get wiped, so what's the real point? For me, the real problem, though, is you can beat it in 8 minutes. How much could it be developed? The game, when played normally, takes about an hour. That's pretty short for a game, especially a story-based game, and the fact is the topics are brought up and quickly dropped. there's really no depth to the story here, and while there's interesting ideas attempted, and I have to be honest, I like some of the places that the game goes, it's all done so quickly that no true development really occurs. You could have an amazing game here, maybe bring in a look at the ownership of the news station, more conflict or longer story. I talk more about this in my written review. But with just 7 days, the game doesn't have time to build any impact and ultimately is weak. The idea behind the game is the player is supposed to play the game multiple times and get different endings, but it's done so fast it doesn't work well, and that's ultimately the biggest flaw here. Headliner as a concept is good, but the execution and length kill it, and while the developer is not asking for much, the experience is much too short and underdeveloped to be worth anything other than a giveaway. So for me, Headliner gets a 2 out of 5. It's not an utter failure, mind you, and the game did spark a few interesting ideas in my head, but it's more from the concepts skewed rather than the game itself. The topic is a challenge, admittedly, but that's the developer's choice, and it would not have been easy for any developer to talk about it. But again, it's the length that really holds the game back, not even the take on the topic. And that's Headliner. Honestly, I did see that they did release a new game in this line on October 23rd. I'm going to be honest, I'm probably not going to be picking that one up. Just bad reaction to this. I'm not a fan. But next up, we're going to be talking about Icy. Or UC? No. I'm just making a bad dad joke there. ICEY. It's a good little game. We'll dive into and see how it really is. We are also starting the first looks of the Humble Monthly Bundle for December 2018. We have Metal Gear Solid, Ghost, Ground Zero should already be out. We have Phantom Pain first look and a City Skyline first look also coming. So keep an eye out for those, and I'm sure we'll be talking about them soonish. Until then, I'm King Link, and thank you very much for watching.